Fortnite Chapter 4 has recently came out, bringing a lot of new features, like a new map and some awesome new graphics from the Unreal Engine Lighting 5.1, and a whole lot more. And today I want to see how my old office PC handles these new graphics. This is a Dell OptiPlex 7010. It has a i7-3770 CPU, with a Nvidia RTX 3060 GPU, and 32GB of DDR3 RAM running at 1600 MHz, and a boot drive and a game drive running on a SSD. And for more information on the specs, you can see them in CPU-Z and GPU-Z. Alright, starting off, I am at 1080p on the low settings with the 3D render scale at 100%, so it is actually 1080p. I must say, I am pretty impressed in how the performance was. So at 1080p on the low settings, the game was getting around 147 frames per second on average, with a 1% low of around 41. So, not bad, but the 1% low is a bit low. But to be fair, it wasn't all that stuttery, especially compared to what I've seen before in Fortnite, so it is definitely an improvement over before. Next up is 1080p on the medium preset with 100% 3D resolution. And I was actually pretty surprised as well in this situation, because the game was running quite well. It was getting around 130 frames per second on average, but the 1% lows were only around 60, which is actually pretty high. I was expecting them to be quite a bit lower, especially from the gameplay, because I do remember feeling quite a few stutters on the medium preset. But the 1% lows say otherwise. And it was also a very nice experience playing the game at the medium preset. Also, you might have noticed that the graphics card temperature is rather warm, and there is not much I can do about that. I already have the fan speed cranked manually up to 100%, and I also have the side of the case off with a fan blowing into it. So there's not a bunch I can do there. My case just has astronomically bad airflow. But the graphics card is not thermal throttling as far as I can tell, and the game isn't really using the graphics card fully anyway, so even if it was thermal throttling, it's not going to affect the performance in this situation all that much. Next up is 1080p on the high preset with 100% resolution scaling or 3D resolution. And I managed to get the graphics card a little bit colder for the high preset, and the game was not running all that good. We were actually pretty graphics card limited in this situation. The graphics card was pretty much fully maxed out, and the game was getting only around 60 frames per second. And to add to that, there was a lot of stutters. Not an unplayable amount, but it was getting to the point where it was a little bit annoying. Either way, on the high preset, the game got 56 frames per second on average, with a 1% low of 2 frames per second. So really not that good, but it does look amazing. Next up is 1080p on the Epic preset with 100% resolution scaling or 3D resolution. And the most I can say about how the Epic preset performed was it performed alright. That's about it, just alright. So it got around 40 frames per second on average, and it had a 1% low of around 22. So, not great, but it is playable, but still not great. I think I would pick the medium preset out of any of the presets, but if I was going to be extremely competitive, I would go for the low preset, but that's just me. But that makes me wonder, what happens if I enable hardware RTX? That sounds interesting, especially on the Epic settings. Well, it didn't really perform all that well. It was getting around 30 to 40 frames per second, and I do not have that much footage of this because I died multiple times, almost immediately as well. Yeah, I managed to just fall off of a building and die, so that was neat. Next up is performance mode on the high performance mode settings at 1080p. So after my 10-minute play session on performance mode, I got an average frame rate of 118 frames per second, and a 1% low of 35 frames per second. Though the 1% low is pretty decent, I did actually get quite a few stutters that were quite noticeable. A lot of stutters actually. but all in all, it was pretty playable. I do think I would prefer to play on the low or medium preset, or for me, maybe the high preset because I'm not competitive in the slightest and I like the fancy graphics. But if I'm trying to play the game at least somewhat competitively, I'd probably want to go to the low settings or the medium settings. But hey, how much can you really ask from a 11-year-old office PC? It is far exceeding my expectations. Yes, I did expect it to run this game just fine, as I have a good idea of how this performs, since it is my main computer at one of the houses I live at, but it still does perform really good and exceed my expectations in this game. Let me know what you think of how this performs. Would you consider this a pretty good gaming PC for Fortnite? And I am trying to treat this as a business, and I probably should ask this more often. But if you could you leave a like? If so, that would be amazing. Either way, thank you for watching and have a nice day.